If we treat human history as a massive dataset, a compiled source code of our past, we can begin to run diagnostics on the records. And right in the middle of the European timeline, we've identified a massive glitch. Within the early Middle Ages, the database is dominated by two primary figures, Charles Martel and his grandson, Charlemagne. As the founders of the Carolingian line, their names appear constantly across the 8th and 9th century logs. This graph tracks how often the name Charles appears among European royalty. Following Charlemagne's immediate successors, the frequency drops to absolute zero. For over 300 years, across the East Franconian and Roman German houses, Salian, Guelph, Habsburg, the name Charles vanishes from the ruling class entirely. Charles was a foundational Germanic name. While naming trends do shift, having thousands of nobles across 3 centuries with 0 instances of a high-status name is a statistical outlier that the recorded history cannot explain. This pattern mirrors a null value error in a database. It's the kind of gap found when data is patched into a system in disconnected blocks, leaving a void where the transition should have occurred. When a dataset of this scale contains a 3-century void in its most popular variables, it suggests the timeline was constructed in pieces rather than unfolding as a continuous record. To find the source of the error, we scan the database 300 years later to see where the missing variables reappeared. We found a potential match: Charles I of Anjou. His biographical record contains the same specific variables that make up the Charlemagne file. This timeline shows the overlap, both crowned in Rome at Christmas, separated by exactly 466 years. Their deaths show a similar pattern: Charlemagne in 814, Charles of Anjou in 1285. The 471-year interval suggests these entries were generated using a fixed mathematical offset. Beyond the numbers, we can also compare the physical, visual assets attached to these historical files. This is the tomb sculpture of Charles I of Valois, the great-nephew of Charles of Anjou. His round face and specific facial proportions are a physical match for the silver coins minted centuries earlier for Charlemagne. The system appears to have reused these physical models and biographical data points, copying them across the timeline to fill the empty centuries. This recycling isn't limited to individuals. It governs the structural narrative of entire empires in the database. The Carolingian file follows a precise script. King Pippin is anointed by a high priest, his successor, Charles, leads a massive expansion, and the third king, Louis, consolidates the laws before the empire fractures. This sequence mirrors the script used for the biblical kings of Israel. Saul is anointed by a priest, David expands through conquest, Solomon consolidates the realm. Both empires follow an identical 3-step loop of rise, peak, and division. We see the same procedural generation when comparing Emperor Augustus to Charlemagne. Every major milestone, their births, their ascensions to power, and their deaths, is logged with a repeating 800-year delay. These mathematically perfect, repetitive intervals suggest that this portion of history was generated by a structural algorithm. When the dataset is viewed as a whole, the presence of these repeating loops and null values becomes difficult to ignore. Charlemagne appears to be a composite character, a generated avatar used to provide a necessary anchor for the early medieval timeline. This implies a system that needed to populate a timeline with a credible, high-density backstory in a short amount of time. The internal logic of the errors suggests the simulation may have actually begun much later than we assume, perhaps around the 14th century. The records of the Roman Empire, the Carolingian dynasty, and the Dark Ages behave like pre-rendered lore files, programmed into the system to give our current reality a historical foundation.